welcome back to the Butter Notes Podcast. This is your co-host, Jim. I'm here with Jake and Tone yet again, unfortunately. And today, we're going to talk about the Mars Volta.
Unfortunately.
This is a one-shot. We're gonna crush all of it.
This is Jake here.
Crush all of it today.
This is Jake here, and I was wondering about that.
Hey, look at that. He did it.
Yeah, because nobody asked.
Well done, Jake.
Because nobody asked me to. I was just going to wait until no one was expecting it. So I was wondering, this is a one-shot, but it's also a deep dive, because we're doing the whole thing. So I was wondering, this is like an intermediate sort of thing. We're doing all 8 releases in, well, I don't know about all 8, there might be more, but we're doing 8 releases in one episode.
It's all 8 of the non-archival releases.
Yeah, that's a pretty long one-shot. This Discog is just like, it's just a little bit too short to do a multi-part deep dive. I think this one's definitely fit for a one-shot.
Yeah.
I agree, but it would be, and this is Tone talking, it would have made no sense to leave out Tremulant and Scabdates because it's part of the catalog.
You can tell we argued about this passionately before we made the decision. We've put a lot of thought into this and talked about it.
We always do.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty reflective in our body of work.
This is professional content here. So let's hear some professional opinions about the Tremulant EP. Let's hear some hot takes about this.
I had never heard this.
Yeah,
I had never heard this until last week.
Me either. No, I hadn't heard this until yesterday. So I'm a little. I'm behind the curve even more.
Yep, I thought this was great. It's a great like entry point. It's only 20 minutes long, so it's hard to compare it really to the flagship LPs from Mars Volta. But like, this is a great first release from a band.
It's pretty important to listen to Tremulant, because if you listen to Relationship of Command by At the Drive-In and then you listen to De-Loused right after that, it's you can tell it's the same 2 dudes. You can tell it's Omar and Cedric, but it's pretty fucking far removed.
Yeah.
And Tremulant is the bridge, and a lot of people don't listen to Tremulant, so they're like kind of perplexed at that change from At the Drive-In to Mars Volta. But then when you get the bridge of Tremulant, it makes a lot more sense. So it's really, really important to listen to, at least for historical reasons.
Yeah, I mean, At the Drive-In was a band I hadn't even listened to until a couple of years ago. I'd heard Mars Volta for the first time years and years ago, like when we were kids, but hadn't heard At the Drive-In until a couple of years ago, and I don't think I would have liked it very much if I'd heard it when we were kids, honestly.
You wouldn't have liked Tremulant or At the Drive-In?
No, At the Drive-In.
So James, you just said a second ago, that I'd like At the Drive-In, but this release didn't do much for me. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was painfully average. Like, there's some good grooves in it and some catchy parts, but almost I don't know. It didn't make any kind of impression on me one way or another. I just thought it was completely lukewarm, middling, I guess. So I'm wondering if
I said I'd expect you to like At the Drive-In because you like post-hardcore.
Oh, okay, I see. Not necessarily because this is what it sounds like. Gotcha.
Yeah. You haven't heard At the Drive-In? That's like the post-hardcore band, or like the progressive post-hardcore band.
Yeah, I've never listened to At the
Drive-In.
Drive-In.
It's like the one.
Yeah, never listened to them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I didn't even. I've got
weird that we're even doing this episode if you haven't heard At the Drive-In. But
Mars.
We'll proceed anyway.
Like you said, the Mars Volta is its own thing. Its own thing. I don't know. It's just more on this. Mars Volta was just more on my radar, I guess, in discovering music.
It's a bigger name. It's a much bigger name. Mars Volta.
I think there's much more of a commercial appeal to.
Not necessarily. Depends on the scene you're talking to.
I think music nerds know At the Drive-In more. Like, they're probably maybe more popular than that. I mean, music nerds love the Mars Volta too, but I think if you talk to just rank and file standard music fans who like any kind of metal or rock or whatever, like, they're more likely to have heard the Mars Volta than At the Drive-In.
That's what I would think.
I'd expect that to be the case anyway. I mean,
that's what I expect.
The Mars Volta won a Grammy.
Depends on the kind of fan.
2009, so you've got some definitely more commercially successful.
Oh fuck yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
Wax Simulacra, I think.
That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
Relationship of Command, I know, is the most highly rated. If you put the 2 discographies together, Relationship of Command is always going to be the most highly rated on any kind of Ranger Music or any kind of website. Relationship with Command is going to be the most acclaimed. And I absolutely adore Relationship with Command. It's a 10 out of 10. It's very different, though. Comparing them doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're very different, with Tremulant being the one bridge. And a lot of that has to do with Cedric. It has to do with the songwriting, too. Like, Omar, like, takes, like, a huge leap in complexity starting with De-Loused. But Cedric is a big part of it. Like, Cedric develops a pretty different vocal style on De-Loused and onward with that crazy falsetto that doesn't. Yeah. That's not really on Tremulant. It's not really on at the drive-in. He's like, you can tell it's him. Like, you can tell it's the same singer, but like, he's wearing very different hats as a vocalist with TMV and with at the drive-in.
Yeah.
But on Tremulant, he's more in the style of what you hear on at the drive-in. You're not getting that. Just like absolutely bonkers falsetto yet. That doesn't start until De-Loused.
Now, weird irony here. So we had something similar come up when we did the Dance Gavin Dance deep dive, where we did Whatever I Say Is Royal Ocean first, and James didn't like it. Well, he had his criticism of it was the production wasn't great, and I flamed him for it. And now I'm sitting here thinking that the production on this isn't great. That was kind of my main, like, the vocal production I thought was lacking in a lot of areas on this. I'm wondering, I mean, is the production style, is that typically what you hear on At the Drive-In?
No, there are a bunch of effects all over the vocals on Tremulant. That's what it's not like the vocals not being recorded correctly. There are like effects on like almost not just the vocals. Like this whole EP is like flooded with effects. Omar was really into that kind of thing around this time. Omar has always been like really, really into dub and shit like that, and that's coming off across a lot on Tremulant.
There's a lot of effects across the whole discog we'll be talking about. But I was just curious. I caved and watched a Fantano video in which he ranks or does a tier list of the Mars Volta records, and made a point I agreed with, but then I wasn't sure. He said, of course, the Mars Volta's coming together as a fully formed band, basically. Like, you've got guys who have experience writing music, having had toured and all these sorts of things. And that's why you get such strong releases at the start. But when I listened to this, I thought, well, maybe not. But maybe I'm just like, I don't have the context of At the Drive-In, so maybe I need to listen to that stuff first.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer. I mean, comparing, like, this isn't really it's not a one-to-one comparison with Royal Ocean, because you've got 3 At the Drive-In records. Like, they've got studio experience. They're older. They know what they want going into this, and it shows.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
and it sounds.
Tremulant is not
this
like,
sounds good. I like the production on Tremulant.
Yeah, it's not like an amateur effort. The way it sounds is intentional.
No.
Omar is like a studio whiz, like that dude. Like, Omar is like, he's a full-blown genius, honestly. So you're never gonna like hear a record that Omar is involved with and just like hear like incompetence. That's like just factually not what you're hearing on Tremulant.
There's a moment on one of the later albums we'll be talking about where I knew that about Omar, and there's a part that we'll talk about that just tilts the fuck out of me, but yeah, we'll get to that. I know that everything they do is like meticulously planned.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to a lot of Omar's solo albums, which there are a million of them, but a lot of them are similar to this, just like like reverb, like drenched, like it sounds like it's underwater, like the vocals are like processed to a fuck. Like, Omar does a lot of shit like that, and Tremulant is kind of him doing that, and then Cedric kind of putting his like kind of yelpy hardcore vocals on top of it. Yeah. It's a really interesting little EP. I'm not going to put it even on the same level as the full-blown studio albums from TMV, but it's still essential in my opinion. So I'm glad I made you bros listen to it.
It's one of the most highly rated.
It was 20th for 2002. That's pretty.
It's the third highest rated release for Mars Volta.
That's wild.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but
that's interesting. There's a shitload fewer ratings for it though, so the average is probably weighted a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I was also thinking, this band, obviously, like, there's a foundation to the sound, like, genre-wise, like, it's post-hardcore. But there are a lot of influences bearing on this music that, in some ways, I think makes this music hard to classify. Like, there aren't a lot of bands. There are bands who've been inspired by the Mars Volta, obviously. Like, I think Dance Gavin Dance has obviously been inspired by them. I think Circus Survive was inspired by them. I mean, any post-hardcore in like the mid to late 2000s is probably inspired by the Mars Volta, but there's also this heavy psychedelic influence on at least the first 2 or 3 albums, but I would say across the whole thing. And then there's the sort of jazzy kind of Latin jazz influence as well. And I think in some ways, like, obviously you can say it's post-hardcore or it's psychedelic or whatever, but I think it kind of resists classification in some ways. And I think maybe that's what people tend to mean when they say it's experimental, because it's hard to classify. So it's experimental. It just pushes the boundaries of like whatever format they're working in, right? Or it's progressive for that because it's technical and or whatever, something like that.
Yeah,
it's progressive rock.
I don't think anything else sounds like Mars Volta.
I don't either. I mean,
I don't think anything else sounds.
I think like among, I don't know, a band like this is just an example, like the Flower Kings is like a symphonic prog band. Like obviously they have their own sound, but there are other bands where you're like, oh, that's, you know, you can tell it's like pretty close genre wise. But in this case, it's much more difficult for me to find like a direct comparison to the Mars Volta. Like, I can recommend like if someone likes the Mars Volta, I could probably recommend stuff that those people might like. But then again, it might be kind of difficult to do that. Even it's like, what parts of the music do you like? Like, do you like the more like extended psychedelic compositions? Do you like the sort of punk hardcore kind of grooviness, or do you like the kind of Latin jazz parts? I don't know. But that's one of the reasons I think they're so interesting. I guess because they can bring all those influences and they make it work. That could go south really easily, I would think.
Yeah. So, one, let's sort of move on here to De-Loused, but two, thinking about the compositional style. I read this earlier. So Omar writes all the music. Everything is composed 100% by Omar, and I read that earlier on Wikipedia he would write the other parts, give it to the musicians, but he wouldn't let them hear them in context. So he'd say, here's your bass part. Go record this. Like, go track this for the album. You don't get to hear anything else. You'll hear it when it's done.
Huh.
Yeah. So, like, it's hard to even say they. Like, this is sort of just like one crazy guy's brainchild in a lot of ways. Like, Omar is just this mad scientist who hears exactly what he wants and manages to pull it out of the musicians that are playing in the band.
That's cool.
It's two people's mad brainchild, because Cedric does 100% of the lyrics and vocal and writes all the vocal lines, and that's a really big part of the music. So
absolutely fair enough.
And I mean, they describe the band as like the Mars Volta is Cedric and Omar. It's a partnership between Cedric and Omar, and it's performed by various musicians. So like the Mars Volta is Cedric and Omar. They like don't even say that like the other musicians, who are a lot of like fucking amazing musicians who we'll talk about, they don't even like really say that they're part of the band, which is accurate.
Yeah, and they switch up. They switch up over the years too.
Speaking of, we get Flea on all the bass lines on De-Loused.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's right. He was a last minute replacement, I guess. It was originally, I want to say Ava something. It was originally Ava something, and then Flea comes in and plays all the parts. Yeah, good God, what a debut!
I was gonna ask, is this I'm not taking a stance, but is this the best debut album from a group post 2000? It's in the conversation, right? It has to be.
It's one of the best albums from a group ever.
Well, yeah.
This is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, debut aside, but I hear you though, Jake. Like, this is such a confident debut, especially for such groundbreaking material. Like, they come out swinging, like, with stuff that's never been tried. Like, there's no precedence for Mars Volta.
Yeah, like you listen to this and it's just like, it's an album that you're in awe of, really. Like, I cannot believe that I'm hearing what I'm hearing, and it's so good. It's like hard to even talk about De-Loused, honestly. It's like you listen to it and you're like, I can't believe that there's music that's this good.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's so
Like,
hard to
that's how-
classify
like-
this stuff. It's weird. Yeah.
I've probably heard De-Loused like I've heard it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
First time I heard it, I think I was 16.
I probably listened to
and,
it
like-
100 times on the line at Red Lobster. Like that was what I played that summer when I was working there. Like this is all like this and Bedlam were like the two I had on repeat.
Fucking
yeah.
based.
Yeah.
Getting through work with this music, yeah.
Yeah,
that
it was
makes
great.
sense.
It was a great time. Yeah.
But yeah, De-Loused, yeah, and I feel the same way about Francis. I feel the same way about all these albums, to be honest, but especially De-Loused and Francis. Like, I listen to it and I'm like, I don't understand how music this good can even exist. And you don't get that feeling that often, and it's awesome when you do. And this is an album that definitely does that for me. And yeah, it's hard to verbalize that, honestly. Like, you can, I guess, like, you could try to, like, enumerate what's going on in the music, but that's not going to do it justice.
No. And I mean, even past all of the visionary stuff that's happening on this album, it's just structured so well too. Like, there's nothing out of place. Like, there's nothing there. I'm like, oh, that maybe could have switched to somewhere else, or that maybe didn't work there. I mean, right off the bat with was it Son et Lumiere and into inertiatic ESP? Like I mentioned that last week, I think, where that transition is just godly. Like it hits you. It's just got so much force and energy in it. I don't know. That's like. It's so early. I mean, it's like one of the first parts of their discography, but it's just like one of the most memorable parts. I think it's just like that's how they like lead. It's not that kind of like wispy psychedelic stuff happening in the vocal line. It's just kind of dragging on for a second, then it just hits you, man. It's it's so good. It's such an experience. It just kicks the album off, and it makes you feel good every single time. Like that rush of dopamine you get when inertiatic starts is amazing.
Yeah, Son et Lumiere just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and then just boom, and that shit is fucking it's special stuff. It's special stuff. And Cedric just belting out at the beginning of Inertiatic. Like what a fucking singer. Cedric kind of destroyed his health singing this music. Like he talks about it a little bit. He had to get like a serious vocal coach. Like he basically he talks about this. It's like this ad for this vocal coach that he used, and he was like, he basically says like I was like killing myself doing this, and so taught me how to basically get my life in order to make it possible to do this. He was like, I was trying to sing this music and also live like a hard life, basically kind of party at the same time. And Cedric was like, it was impossible.
These dudes were strung out
because the physicality of Cedric on these albums, like it's unbelievable, to be honest. Some of the notes
the dude is belting
hits,
just basically nonstop.
Yeah.
He's just belting nonstop.
Even more remarkable, I think, I think one of the reasons for the split, as I read with the split from At the Drive-In, why the two left, is that they had a bit of a drug problem. When I say a bit of a drug problem, I think they were doing all sorts of drugs all the time. People complained in the early days, I think, that their live shows weren't great, which is also something I wanted to mention. I feel like the Mars Volta is a band where their live show is a different animal than what they have on the studio releases. You know what I mean? Like it's got the. They seem to be like much more, and I'm not just doing that from Scabdates. I've watched videos and stuff and have read what people had to say about them. They do these much more like long form psychedelic jams in their live sets, using the songs as kind of a platform. But I think in the early days they were having trouble playing live shows. Like they couldn't remember a lot of the live shows they played because they were doing all sorts of different drugs. Which, I mean, living that lifestyle and being able to pump out something this brilliant is, I don't know, it's kind of remarkable. It kind of reminds me of the Johnny Craig thing. Like, how could you write Downtown Battle Mountain and not remember any of it or whatever?
Yeah,
it's wild. I mean, it's pure natural talent. That's all it is. Yeah.
I saw them. It wasn't billed as the Mars Volta. It was billed as Omar Rodriguez Lopez group. But it was the Mars Volta. It was Omar and Cedric, and at that time it was D'Anthony Parks on drums. So it was the Mars Volta in 2011, and they were fucking amazing. That was after Cedric got totally sober. And it was a fucking amazing show. All the songs they played are songs that I don't think ever appeared on an album ever. I think it was like a lot of it was improvisation. A lot of it was Cedric like improvising his vocal lines and the lyrics. I think like mainly off the cuff, and it was fucking awesome. But there are clips of them playing live in like 2005 or whatever that are not up to par. That is true.
It seems to be the case that around the time Bedlam came out is when they started getting sober and like more directed for like they became a machine like working the. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the different approaches. I don't think the music suffered for it either way. It's just an interesting little piece of trivia. Knowing like what went into recording this album. And I didn't know the bit about Omar hiding the parts from the band members. That's really interesting too. This stuff shouldn't work. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, man. What I love about De-Loused and the discography in general is that it sort of strikes this perfect balance between being unique, but it's also good, and it's also challenging. It's all three of those things in this perfect fusion. Like,
yeah, like you get
it really is. It's a marvel. It really is just a marvel that this is released, like you said, Anthony.
Yeah, like you get that like underwater ambient section in Cicatrice, which is like basically like the exact middle of the album. And that's always something that I love, is like how that's sort of like this like interlude for the whole album, that underwater ambient section in Cicatrice. That's genius. Televators, like the lower paced song is like might be the best song on this record, honestly. Televators.
That might be my favorite in the song of theirs.
Wow,
in general,
yeah. I love Drunk Ship of Lanterns. That's probably my favorite on this. Just like it comes in with that like psychedelic
that
effect.
Latin rhythm, yeah,
that Latin rhythm. It's like I don't know. I think of Santana a lot on a lot of these tracks, and then it's got that like really angular like you described anything as spidery kind of like riffs. Like it's kind of like I don't know. It's like crawling over you or something. And then the vocal stuff that Cedric's doing on that, really interesting. Yeah, I don't know that. And then I love the first like I love all of Cicatrice, but the first like 3 minutes or so, just that like bass rhythm that's happening underneath the vocals with the I don't know. Yeah, that's I don't know. It's really hard to pick a favorite from this, but I would probably go with Drunk Ship of Lanterns.
And the dynamic range on this album is stunning too, and the same goes for Francis. I think what I'm gonna say is equally true of Francis. Like it gets quiet, like it goes from quiet to loud constantly, and at no point is it jarring. It's like, and that's hard to do. Like a lot of bands would try to do that and it would just sound jarring, and it sounding jarring isn't necessarily bad. Like there's music that's jarring that's good for that reason, but this album really isn't. Like the shifts in volume and tempo are all over here. Like these songs are never like complacent at all, but it always sounds organic, and it never sounds like overly busy, in my opinion.
I agree.
Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
I think it's a good transition.
All right, on to Francis the Mute. Another absolute killer, man. I mean, they didn't skip a beat. They didn't skip a fucking beat going on to Francis.
I skipped a beat. I hadn't heard this until recently.
Regardless of what Pitchfork thinks. What'd you say, Jay?
I skipped a beat. I hadn't heard this until recently. It's kind of embarrassing. Yeah, I mentioned that the other day.
That doesn't make any sense. What you said made such little sense that I thought you were fucking with me.
Yeah, I tried to block that out. I forgot about it.
I seriously thought you were trolling. That's how little sense what you said made to me. I still don't understand it. And now I have to listen to it again.
Should I explain it for our faithful viewers? I mean, now I have to say something about it. I mean, so I got just context. I got into the Mars Volta. I think there was a post that the Prog Report had made back in the day, where they did like the top. It was like the best prog rock songs of the 2000s or something. And James has the Discord up, and there's an unsavory image that. Anyway.
It looked pretty savory. It was
quite savory.
Not as savory as the other one.
Jesus, you're going back too far.
No, keep going. Yeah, keep.
Anyway, yeah. So they did a like rundown top 50 songs or prog rock songs of the 2000s, and Cicatrice was on there. I can't remember what number it was, but anyway, I'd never heard it, so I was like, okay, I got to check this out. And I was basically. I mean, I still mostly listen through streaming services through Spotify, and I'm pretty sure Francis the Mute wasn't on Spotify, so I didn't even know it existed. Like I just listened through all the stuff that was on there, and then I found out a bit later that it was a release. but I knew that they had like an archival release coming out, and I knew that they had like the live stuff and the EP, and so I just thought it was a sideshow thing. I didn't like research
What
the
the
band. I was
fuck?
just listening to the music.
Do you not just
Yeah.
like look at a band's albums on Wikipedia or some shit? Like, do you
No,
not
I wasn't
do
doing that. I was just listening to the music and having a good time with it. I didn't really care about the history of the like at the time. You know, I don't know. It was just
You
good
didn't
music.
just
I
see
liked
like
listening to
what albums does this band have? Like, let's look at Wikipedia for 2 seconds.
it was on their
You
Spotify
don't do
page. I
that?
had it
Yeah,
saved.
I'm kinda basic.
I'm too Spotify sucks for chronology.
Spotify.
Like it's fucking horrible for chronology. Like you have
But
to
it- yeah.
rely on another.
It wasn't even on
service
there.
to figure
and-
out what's.
no, at that time, I don't think I was reading too much about. I was just listening to so much new music that I just couldn't keep up with all the like history of it and stuff. I didn't come to appreciate that until years later. I was like, I should like deep dive all this stuff. Why I don't know what like the cultural and historical significance of these groups. I don't think it's that weird once you start listening. I mean, when you guys were in high school listening to new stuff, did you like? I mean, it's harder to do it back
Yes.
in the day, but like
Obsessively
okay.
so. Yes,
maybe
I
it's
did.
different. I don't know. I mean, I know trivia for like a lot of my favorite bands. Like I said, I followed Periphery like a boy band, so I know everything about them. I don't know. My time just wasn't spent. I mean, I was reading a lot of like philosophy and stuff, and like writing papers and stuff. So I just didn't have time to really like think about it. So I just would listen to the music. I don't know. I just didn't think to listen to it. So it never came up.
I was
'cause it
too
wasn't on
I
Spotify.
was too busy writing philosophy papers to look into the catalog.
Yeah, I was.
Based.
I was obsessed with doing that. So I don't know. I had the music.
You
on and
hearing
was
this
listening to
guy?
it.
No, I tuned
I
out
was
there for
busy.
the last.
I was
2 or
too
3
busy. I
minutes.
couldn't
That's a
be
good
bothered.
idea.
I couldn't be bothered with it.
It was a smart decision.
I was too busy I was too busy studying philosophy to look into the discography.
That's
of the
incredibly
Mars Volta.
based. I don't know what you're laughing about.
Good excuse. Very good excuse. Based excuse.
So Francis the Mute.
Oh yes. No, it's
Quite
it's
excellent.
Quite excellent.
Yeah, it's quite excellent.
All their longest songs, definitely their longest songs. Perhaps their most radical release. Either
I would
Francis
say
or Amputechture would probably be their most radical. I don't know. Bedlam's pretty radical too, but Bedlam's radical in different ways.
Yeah.
Francis the Mute is insane. Like, this album is insane. It's like,
Yes, it is. It's insane. That's exactly the right.
I feel
word.
like this is what like I feel like Francis is like what like Close to the Edge must have sounded like to people who were first hearing it in the 70s or something. Like new grounds are broken on Francis the Mute that I don't think have ever even been touched on. Like, this album is nuts. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know how to really talk about it. Like, Francis the Mute is nuts. Attempting to describe it would kind of make it sound like it sucks. Because, again, it would just be, like, enumerating all the different styles that they run through and shit like that. And that would kind of make it sound like it's just, like, messy and just, like, pure chaos. Which some people do think that about this album and about the Mars Volta in general. So maybe to some people's ears that is what it is. I know for a fact to some people's ears that's what it is. But certainly not to mine.
No, nor to mine. I absolutely love this stuff. I think this is just as good as De-Loused.
I think there's such a natural unity, like in all the sounds they pull from. To my ears, it totally makes sense that all the stuff could go together. But I think you're right, Anthony. Yeah, on paper, it doesn't make any sense, and that's kind of the theme I have for most of these albums. Just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think there's much, isn't there? I think the sort of Latin influence on this is much more prevalent on this album. I mean, obviously they have Elvia, which is sung partially in Spanish. I'm reminded of Calamentiento by Dance Gavin Dance. There's actually a moment in Elvia that reminds me, like, there's like a vocal effect or a part where it sounds like what Tillian, or it sounds like Tillian was inspired by Cedric at that moment. I thought that was
Elvia is
interesting
an
bit.
insane track, especially
is.
the latter half. That like a lot of the piano solo on Elvia is absolutely beautiful. Like that like full blown Latin jazz like section that comes in the latter part of Elvia, and then like that piano solo kind of breaks into that almost flamenco style guitar solo from Omar. I don't know if that solo is from Omar or from John Frusciante. I don't know, but it's a fucking awesome guitar solo. It would be from one of the two of them. And then there are moments of Cassandra Gemini that are just like so ungodly intense that I'm just like in awe of it every time. Like the that builds where Cedric singing 25 Lives in the Lake Tonight, and it just like builds, and he just like gets louder, and he's just screaming that lyric like louder and louder and louder, and like it's so intense. Like I feel like there are parts of this album that are like more intense than like anything you would find in like metal almost, even though this isn't metal music. And that's something I really admire specifically about Francis the Mute. I definitely think this is, a lot of people say that Bedlam is their most intense record, but like in general it is, but I think there are moments of Francis that are definitely more intense than Bedlam, in my opinion.
Do you mean intense from like
it lets up more?
Yeah, do you mean intense and like, I see one of the tags here, that's what I always, or the descriptors I think of is anxious. That's how I feel when I listen to Lost music. Like this is a group sometimes where I've mentioned this previous artists where I'm listening to it and then I realize that I'm really stressed out from listening to this music. I should maybe listen to something else if I'm just like, trying to get some work done. Like that's kind of how I feel for like, a lot of this music. Yeah, which is not bad.
It's like a balloon. Yeah. It's like a balloon, and it's blowing up, and it's blowing up, and it's blowing up, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger, and then like it's like getting so big that like it's like transparent, and it's like so close to popping, and it just keeps blowing up, but it's not popping. Like that's what this music is like sometimes. I feel like that's a good way to analogize it.
Yeah, no, that is good. That's a good visual. I think that's right. Yeah, some great grooves on this album too. I think it's even groovier maybe than De-Loused. De-Loused I felt was much more psychedelic and like dreamy, airy kind of at times. I mean, there's not to say there weren't good grooves on that, but I think this album is groovier, especially on Cygnus. I think there's a lot of good grooves on that track. I don't know. I just think the Latin influence on it does that, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Latin influence is very high, and also the like music concrete kind of like avant-garde chamber music influence that's always been a part of Omar's repertoire that comes through. The really time you're only really hearing that on Cicatrice, on De-Loused, but you're hearing it all over Francis. There are a lot of crazy abstract ambient instrumental soundscapes in here, like that really long, like almost like field recording section at the end of That Ghost Just Doesn't Love You Anymore, or Miranda. That section is always like, I often only listen to it when I'm listening to the album as a whole, but I'm always like, I think that like sort of like nature field recording section at the end of Miranda is pretty genius. I know a lot of people feel like kind of divided about it. I think it bogs the album down for a lot of people, but I actually think it's kind of essential to this album.
There are moments in this discography where things kind of drag. I even feel that maybe in some of the later releases. So I get that when people say that. They do mess around. They stretch things out sometimes. Maybe, I mean, I think on these first two releases, and especially this one, they make it work, and I'm not bored by it or anything like that. But I can understand it. They push it right up to the limit. And for some people, they go over that limit for like, I don't know, just condense it, and like it's not. I don't think a lot of people are like, oh, it's just too long. Like that's an easy thing to say, but I think for some people, it's like, okay, you've like beat the hell out of that idea. But I don't know. That's one of the cool things about them is they get an idea and then they just explore that idea. Like they've got a really good idea, and they're not just throwing in a bunch. That's something where like a band like this could go wrong. Is they're just like, here's a cool idea I have, here's another cool idea I have, and then they just patchwork it together. I think they get a really good balance on this album in doing it that way. I think this would probably be the album if I were to go to a live show and they were to play a full album of any of these, I'd probably want to listen to this one live the most of any of them.
Oh yeah, this is probably the album that's most reflective of their live show. I would say for sure it is. And we could move on to Amputechture, I guess, because Amputechture is like a good that's a good segue into Amputechture, because Amputechture is another album that does that. Where move on to Scabdates. We don't need to talk about Scabdates for very long.
Scabdates first.
Scabdates isn't really very good.
Let's go to
no, it's not.
Unfortunately.
No, it's not.
Yeah, there are moments. I don't know. I mean,
I was kind of like, why did Anthony make me listen to this? I mean, there's some good moments. There's like, that's an example of them having a bunch of ideas that I mean, the baby crying for I don't know how long it was like 7 minutes, and I was like please, I don't want to have to listen to this right now. I listened over the weekend and I was like, I need to listen to something else. It's fine. The Cicatrice rendition is interesting. But yeah, there are some moments on here that just drag on. And I don't know, they just don't seem to go anywhere. I don't know. That's just kind of how I felt about this release.
Anthony, when did you hear this for the first time?
High school.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't listen to it very often. I mean, it's not. It doesn't have very good reception. It's kind of weird that this was the show that they decided to. I don't know. I actually don't know if it is a full show or excerpts from various shows. I think it's just one show, but I'm not positive. It's interesting that they didn't put out something better as their live album. It's not like this is bad or anything, but it kind of sounds like a sort of like a bootleg archival thing, as opposed to like a professionally curated live album. It is kind of a head scratcher. I mean, I do like it. Like, if this was another band, I would probably think pretty highly of it, actually. But you're inevitably listening to it with the shadow of their other material, and it definitely pales in that shadow. But it is an important part of the catalog, so I'm actually kind of surprised you bros hadn't listened to it before.
Yeah, this was taken from 5 different shows.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, 2 shows at the Wiltern Theater in LA, 2 shows from the Roseland Ballroom in New York City, and 1 show from the Avalon Ballroom in Boston.
Huh. That's an interesting choice.
All over the course of like a week.
Oh, I see.
So actually not true. Wow. That's they were over the course of a year.
Huh.
Yeah, 2 of the shows were in May 2004. And then 3 of them were in May 2005.
Huh.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
I wonder what went in the decision to include the particular pieces. That is kind of interesting.
I mean, there's some good guitar playing. There's some pretty interesting, like, soundscapes and, like, electro noodling on here. Cedric sounds okay on here. Cedric isn't really that forward on here. Not nearly as much as on the studio albums.
There is some outrageous guitar playing, actually.
There's some great guitar playing.
The part at the end of Take the Veil, what Serpent Taxed, I don't know how the hell you pronounce half of these songs. but their guitar part at the end of that track is just ridiculous. It's like a frit part that Rodriguez Lopez pulls off fucking flawlessly live.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that on here. I think the fault with Scabdates is like maybe it would have been better if they would have just presented a whole show instead of trying to do the excerpts. And I don't know, like there are ways that this could have been better, I think, although I can't exactly identify how, because there's a lot on here that's really fucking good. Yeah. I don't really know how it could have been better. Like, I have no doubt that they put on shows in 2004 and 2005 that were fucking awesome. So I kind of wish that we would have had one of those as an official live album.
Stitching together various parts of different shows is a very, very difficult thing to pull off.
No doubt.
That's like, because a live show has, at least, for most bands, I think there's an energy that you capture in a live setting that you can't capture in an album. And like in a studio setting. And the cool thing about releasing one show is that you get that energy, you get to capture that on tape. But when you're stitching stuff together, you lose some of that momentum. So I don't know. I mean,
could you imagine if like At Fillmore East had been like stitched rather than, I mean, like, it wouldn't have been called, I mean, maybe they'd like done multiple shows, but like, yeah, could you imagine like the flow of that album if they just stitched together different parts of different shows they had played that year or something? Definitely would have obstructed the vibe, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, they're like,
I actually think that they were there, buddy.
That is definitely possible. A lot of live albums are like that.
It's from 3 different shows.
Which one?
Fillmore East.
Is it really? Oh, well, so then I stand corrected. No, that's interesting. Then maybe this one just doesn't work.
It's not like a miserable failure or anything.
Fillmore. Yeah.
No.
I think Jake dislikes it a lot more than we do. Jake, I think,
I feel pretty neutrally about.
I think Jake is just like really filtered by psychedelic music. This is something I'm starting to realize. Gonna need to force him to listen to more of it.
Like, this is the second. This is like the second sample. I like second. We did Psych Porcupine Tree, and I love that shit.
Yeah, it's
You
not
mean-
as psychedelic as this
I-
shit is.
I know, yeah, I guess that's right. Like heavy psych. Yeah. Didn't I pick I picked Fleetwood over Can, didn't I?
Yeah,
Yes, which is
it's fairly
just
atrocious.
unacceptable.
And
Oh
over
my
Paranoid
God.
by Black Sabbath.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Why don't we move on?
I can't abide that.
These are all
Yeah,
three.
why don't we
They're
move on?
all-time albums. All three of them. Like, it's such an outrage. Get off
Fucking
your high
Fleetwood
horse.
Mac.
It's not an outrage.
What's wrong with you?
It's not an
What's wrong with
outrage.
you,
It's
boy?
not an outrage.
It's an outrage.
You have a low bar, my friend.
One other quick thing I want to point out about De-Loused and Francis before we move on. Actually, it's pretty cool that Storm Thurgeson did the artwork for those records. For those of you who don't know, that's Dark Side of the Moon. I think he did some other cool shit too.
He's done a lot of classic album covers, and yeah, both of those are awesome covers. So
They're great.
but then the artist that they get to do the
He
rest
did-
of the album covers is also, I love all those covers too. Those surreal kind of like
Oh man,
weird body proportions and everything on the later album covers.
Yeah, these next two album covers are pretty close in style, I would say. And they probably were the same artist, right?
Yeah,
Dude,
and so is Octahedron.
Thorgerson did tons of albums. Holy shit!
Yeah, he's one of the most well
Lamb
known.
Lies Down. He did the 1984 album for Rick Wakeman.
Based.
Nice. Anyway, let's move on to Amputechture here. This is just a flurry of releases too, by the way. These guys released music just nonstop for 6 years.
And Omar was making a whole bunch of shit on his own too. Like the amount of solo material that guy has is astonishing. Omar was just like on an absolute tear in the 2000s and early 2010s, like an absolute goddamn tear. And he hasn't really he's slowed down enormously like after the Mars Volta have broken up. Like At the Drive-In are still active, and he did Anti-Mask and all that shit, so he's definitely still like an active musician, but his pace has slowed down enormously. Like, it is astonishing to think about all the music that he made around these years.
Seriously. You got to think somebody will just burn out after a while, but they just kept going and going and going.
I think he did burn out eventually, as I said. Although I don't know if it's burnout or just like, I guess your interests can shift. Just because you are obsessed with making music for a period of time doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be obsessed with it for your whole life. It's speculation. So does Jake have some hot takes about Amputechture? Let's just get those out of the way.
What? Now you guys go first. Introduce the album.
No, let's just hear the
See what
hot
it's all
takes
about.
Jake has about Amputechture.
No, it's like what I said earlier about how sometimes this music can drag on a bit. I felt this album drags a bit. It's obviously really good. I love the Latin influence. They really lean into it. I get a lot of like Carlos Santana on this. And in those moments, they're really cool and interesting. I think they remove some of the grooviness on the album, which to me is like some of my favorite parts of the discography. Not to say it's not on here, but I think it's much less present on this release. But by the near the end of the like when I get to the day of the Baphomets, I'm not like waiting just on pins and needles for it to be over, but like sometimes I just feel like it drags. And then you get to El Ciervo, and then there's that like really drug-soaked outro part, and then it just ends, and I'm like, that's definitely Omar playing a joke, because this music is like I felt much more long form, or it's in that style anyway, and then the album just ends abruptly or something, and I was kind of just like, fucking bastard, like maybe I don't know.
It's not a
The
joke.
ending did catch me off guard when I listened to it last week. I hadn't heard it in a long time, and I was like, "Oh man, they're just turning it off."
There's a long tradition
I've
of
always
that.
felt that way about this album, but no, I know "Pull Me Under" is the one I think of. I mean, it the idea maybe symbolizes death or abrupt ending or something like that. Like I get it, like artistically I get it, but I don't know. I felt like there are some moments on here where I'm kind of like, I don't know. It's good. I mean, there's no way to say this without making it sound bad. There's some parts on here where I felt like I was like, okay, fellas, like wrap it up a little bit, or I don't know. That's just kind of how I felt. undeniably great music. The compositions are tight. The playing's amazing. That's really just that's like my, I don't know, that's what separates it from the other two albums, where I felt like no space was wasted on the previous two releases.
I love Amputechture.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree.
So much.
I think
I disagree so much. Every moment of
do
here
too.
I love.
Yeah, I do too, man. I like this. This is on the same level as De-Loused and Francis for me.
It's much more mellow release, I will say, which is a nice like
No,
change
isn't.
of pace. I think it's much more mellow, especially
No,
the
it
first half
is.
of the album.
No, it isn't.
I think so.
There's some insane shit on here. There are some mellow moments.
Well, yeah, it's the Mars Volta. I just mean it's much more. It's more. I think it's more mellow than the other two.
Viscerize is ridiculously intense. Day of the Baphomets is insanely intense. Most of Tetragrammaton is crazy intense. Like it's not as like uniformly intense as Bedlam, but none of their albums are. So I don't think that I don't really think I would not describe Amputechture as a mellow album in the slightest. I definitely disagree with that.
No, I didn't say it was mellow. I said I think it's comparably more mellow than the other two. And I think that owes to the atmosphere and the guitar playing. That was my observation. I wouldn't call it mellow at all. I just think it's comparably more mellow.
I guess. It like Francis would be the Mars Volta album it's most comparable to. For reasons that I talked about already.
Yeah. Tetragrammaton's amazing. I love that track. And it's the longest one, in spite of what I just said.
Vicarious Atonement is some of my favorite vocal work from Cedric of all time, and amazing guitar playing from Omar too. Like when I don't think there's any drumming at all on Vicarious Atonement. If there is, there's not very much. It's mainly just the synth, atmospheric synths, and like that, like fucking beautiful fuzzy guitar from Omar.
Oh my god, I love, dude, that washy fuzz guitar in the beginning. I fucking adore that sound.
Yeah,
man.
it's fucking amazing.
I absolutely adore that sound.
And then it just kicks into Tetragrammaton, and like, which is a pretty consistently intense track. That's 17 minutes too. And then Vermicide, which is like one of their great catchy singles. Mecha Amputechture is probably my favorite on the whole album. Yeah, I mean, looking at these tracks, every single one of these tracks fucking absolutely kills it. I adore this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Non-stop bangers, dude. Yeah, I love this one. It seems like people don't like it very much. There are a lot of these.
It's a polarizing record, I think. I think a
reviews
lot of the later stuff is polarizing. I mean, the whole discography is polarizing, but I think the later stuff is not as highly regarded. Like post-Francis, even. I think there are a lot of people who think Francis is like the high point of Omar and Cedric's career, and then it goes downhill. I don't necessarily agree. I think the later stuff isn't as strong as the earlier stuff, but I don't think there's a significant drop off like what's reflected in the aggregate here.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Like everything here is pretty fucking good.
Yeah, this is still an awesome record.
I would give all 6 Mars Volta albums a 10 out of 10. Like they just do it for me. They hit my hot spots, musically. So like, but I do agree. I agree that De-Loused and Francis are the 2 best. But I mean, it's splitting hairs to my taste.
In that Fantano video I watched, he actually mentioned, he said there are people, this is a polarizing group, and there are people who like rate everything 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, whatever. And then there are just those who hate it. They just hate it. I think it's awful. Like, it's really polarizing like
That's
that.
like kind of how
Mars
art
Volta's a
should
pleb
be.
filter, dude. Yeah, Mars Volta's a total pleb filter.
It's
just in general.
I don't know, like if you're like actually being interesting and taking risks, that's kind of how art should be. So like, even a lot of music I hate, I respect for those reasons, honestly. Because in order for me to like really, really hate music, it probably has to take some risk in some way. So I respect that.
If something is really, really bad, I will go back to listen to it because I can laugh about it. You know, when we talk about certain albums, we like to meme. You know, it's always fun to go back and have a good, like, you can have a good time with them. But there were moments, for example, in the Deep Purple deep dive we were doing when we got into like post Machine Head, where I was just like, I don't care about this music one way or another, and that to me is just that might be worse than
that's the worst. I mean,
it's not memorable.
Yeah. I don't think
like Come Taste the Band. I'm like, I don't hate this, but I don't like it either. And it's just like,
I'm having a hard time thinking of any music that I actually hate.
There's some music that I hate. Yeah, I could name some, like styles anyway. Yeah.
I saw The Sign by Ace of The Sign by Ace of Base. I hate that song. That's a song that I hate.
I've never heard that.
You have definitely heard The Sign. Everyone on planet Earth.
Have I?
Everyone in the Western world post whenever it came out, 1997 maybe. Everyone in the Western world has heard The Sign.
Okay.
I would stake my life savings that you've heard The Sign. You've definitely heard The Sign.
All right. We'll have to find out.
That's the worst shit. I hate that fucking song.
I hate Blink-182. I definitely hate Blink-182.
Yeah.
I don't like Blink-182.
I just can't goddamn do it. I hate it. There's not much that I hate, but I hate that shit.
What else do I hate? There's probably some other music I can think of that I hate.
I hate mumble rap. I can't stand it. I hate mumble rap.
Yeah, I pretty much hate mumble rap.
I hate mumble rap. I hate I hate a lot of like lo-fi indie stuff. I can't stand it. It drives me nuts. That's one of a lot of singer-songwriter where it's just some dude on a acoustic guitar. I just like, I don't know, a lot of that stuff I don't like. But I mean, we all three, I think, score high in openness, so there's not gonna. I mean, we're pretty like, yeah, I don't know, we're pretty open-minded when it comes to a lot of music. So I think it's gonna be difficult to make us hate a piece of music. I don't even hate the gore noise stuff. I mean, I think it's bad, but I think it's funny.
I think it's
like
good.
I listen to it because
so good.
It's terrible, but like it's
I approach
really
that stuff with
I approach that
stuff with religious trepidation.
Yeah, exactly.
I cower before its awesomeness.
Fucking toilet noises. You can find God in the bottom of a toilet.
Benagnuk is religious.
Maybe in its own way. Everyone's
Would it take longer to say an Our Father or to listen to the entirety of Benagnuk?
Probably the former.
I don't know. All right, this seems to be like a good enough signpost. Let's move on to Bedlam and Goliath.
This is probably the most divisive album in the catalog. And anyone who doesn't like it is probably stupid. So that's where I'm coming from.
I agree with that.
I don't actually.
Right,
I don't
moving
actually
on to Octahedron.
I don't actually.
This is a top 25, probably top 25 album of all time of mine for sure. This is my
if we point out, I'd like to say that if we actually tried to like keep track of all the albums that Jake has claimed are in his top 25, it would be like 100 albums.
You think I've said it 100 times?
Maybe not.
I bet you're wrong.
I think it would be more than 25 though.
Well, I mean, it can change. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say my 25s, but I bet it's pretty close. There's like a solid 10 that I have in there for sure, and then I mean, it gets fuzzy.
In all seriousness, I could totally understand why someone would not enjoy the Bedlam and Goliath. I don't actually believe that.
Oh yeah.
Anyone who doesn't is stupid. But
this is a hard fucking album to listen to. It's loud. It's loud.
Cedric is
the vocal effects are insane.
I love this tag, brutal prog.
That's a genre.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
It's mainly.
I love this stuff of. The stuff of this that I've heard is fucking beautiful.
It's pretty much all Yoshida Tatsuya.
Ruins is great.
It's pretty much the entirety of Brutal Prog is Yoshida Tatsuya bands. But Cedric on Bedlam, like almost the entirety of the album, he's singing in like the highest falsetto that his voice can possibly get to. Like, I don't know how he recorded these parts, honestly. Like, I don't know how a human being like recorded these parts. The notes that he is consistently hitting on here.
So like the two I think of is there's that part in Goliath where he just like you know what I'm talking about? There's just I'm not even gonna attempt to try to recreate.
Never has a man spoke like this man before. That part.
Yes,
builds.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. That
might be the highest point
that
he
is amazing.
gets in the entire discography. It gives me chills. And then in Cavaletas, which is my favorite track in the entire discography, I would say.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know that like when the chorus kicks in and it has that groove underneath it. that
Cavalettes
really,
is
like,
probably their grooviest song in the catalog. So, and
Yeah.
if that's what you like most about their stuff, I could see why that would be your favorite.
yeah, that's like a that's I don't know. I probably listened to that song close to 200 times, I would say.
Something interesting about Bedlam,
Just on its own.
and I bet you bros haven't thought about this, but I think when I say it, you'll like agree. Bedlam is like, this album is like very like sexual. It's like very libidinal.
Yes.
It's like did you ever think that before? Like, this is an album, like, obviously like the lyrics are highly abstract, but this album is like honestly like pretty horny. Like, there's just like this like raw lust to it.
There's that part in
which I think is
Cavalettes
fucking
where he's
awesome.
like, there's that part in Cavalettes where he's like, pop the seed into the hole, and I'm like, what else is he talking about? Like, obviously, yeah.
Cavalettes
He's talking
is
about
horny.
gardening.
Cavalettes is horny as
He's
fuck.
talking about gardening. Get your
Yeah.
head out of the gutter.
When that whore won't answer who is in control, like, yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, obviously. This album is wild. It is wide open. It is just like raw, like carnal sexual energy. It's loud, grating. I'm not surprised that people don't like it, or a lot of people don't like it. It's really hard to listen to. And if you like De-Loused and I'm like, hey, go listen to Bedlam, I would not be surprised to come back and like, yeah, I fucking hate this band.
But Bedlam is catchy as hell, though.
That would surprise me. Yeah, like honestly, like I've always thought this one had the most mainstream appeal. Like,
No,
I mean,
would
it won the
think people
Grammy.
would-
It helped him win the
well,
Grammy.
and Goliath, like it's such a catchy tune.
Ileana's really
The single.
Ileana's really catchy. With that like guitar riff that like builds and has like that drum fill and goes, yeah, that's like a nice little groovy part, man.
Cedric is just relentlessly shrill on here, and he's doing it on purpose, and I love it. I think it sounds great, but a lot of people can't deal with that. I think more people can if they like just get used to like a lot of people like get turned off by vocals in bands just because like in the mainstream people are only exposed to like a very small amount of styles of singing. So I think that's why a lot of people get turned off by vocals in bands. And so like you're not hearing a voice like Cedric's anywhere on the mainstream.
No.
So you need to like have some experience with singing like this to be able to handle an album like Bedlam. I love it. I also have a lot of experience listening to vocalists like this. So I think if you like listen to Bedlam and you hate it, I think you should just kind of set it aside for a little bit and just listen to more music and then return to it, and you might feel differently.
Just get good. That's what.
Yeah,
Tone
I was about to say
said.
get good.
Tone just said get good.
I did. No, I'm serious.
Yep.
No, but seriously, I think a lot of times, like if you listen to music and don't like it, it's just because you don't have the right, schema for it. And so, like,
I totally agree, and I got yelled at by some shithead on the internet once about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Surprises me. You got yelled at by a shithead on the internet.
I said people should be willing to have repeat listens for things I don't immediately love, because you're probably missing something.
This person disagreed.
Yeah, someone disagreed. They're like, just turn it off. Like, if you don't have to like it, like just turn it off.
Yeah, you don't have to like it.
About? And of course you don't have to like it.
Oh, one of those people. Like,
yeah.
If you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it. I hate people like that. You're criticizing something
it's not
I like.
possible that you're missing something.
You don't have to be here. You don't have to exist in this space. Go somewhere else. Yeah, I don't like people like that.
Dumb.
Yeah.
Dumb take.
Also, I think picking back up on the sexual nature of this album, I think it's to be expected given that it was written by demons, right? By like ancient.
Yeah, they were. I think they were
demons or whatever.
tripping goddamn balls on a whole lot of stuff while writing this.
They were fucking with a Ouija board.
They were fucking with an Ouija board and
story.
claimed that it fucked with all their studio equipment. And they were also like,
and
Omar was hanging out
on tour and stuff.
Omar was hanging out, I think, somewhere in North Africa. I don't remember what country. It might have been Tunisia, but I'm not positive.
No, they were in. They went to Israel. They went to Israel.
They were in Israel, and they were somewhere else in the Middle East too. Omar and like there were a lot of
Semitic,
field
Babylonian
recordings,
demons and shit. Yeah,
there were a lot of field recordings of like streets in North Africa and Israel on here. A lot of really cool like tape manipulation. Omar has a solo album called Despair, which isn't one of his. It's not like some of his best work, but that album is like totally composed of tape manipulation from field recordings from North Africa and Israel. So that's cool. Thomas Pridgeon comes in on the drums here, and I like John Theodore, the previous drummer, more, but I do have to lay some respect on Thomas Pridgeon for like just the absolute relentless energy that he brings to Bedlam. Like that dude is like hitting every single thing on the kit every second for the whole album. And that's not always what I want from a drummer, but when it's done well, which it is done well here, it's pretty fucking awesome. So
there's no breaks on this album, man. Yeah.
Yeah, the only possible break, there really aren't any breaks.
Yeah. It's relentless, man. I love it. I love it. Lots of energy, lots of really good energy on this album.
Well, let's move on to Octahedron then. Or Octahedron, I don't know how the hell you pronounce it.
Octahedron?
Lots of real fucky pronunciation in this one.
A lot of people don't like Octahedron, or like rate it like vastly below their other material, which I've honestly never really understood. Like, I listen to it and it's fucking great, and I don't understand why people feel that way. A lot of times when people who hate Bedlam, I can understand why. I don't totally understand why some people hate Octahedron.
This is an album that has grown on me. I didn't like it much the first time I listened to it. I think it's much more... This is one I think I can say is obviously more mellow. I mean, especially coming off of Bedlam.
Oh, yeah. It was intended to be that.
It's their... Yeah, it's their shortest album, I believe. But again, I feel like this is maybe the most accessible of them in a lot of ways. So it's kind of surprising to me then that maybe it's the nerds who dislike it so much, and then it just gets filtered because a lot of, like you said, a lot of people who don't have experience listening to this kind of music might not like it. But I've had that experience too. I get it though, but I don't. It's grown on me more as I've listened to it. It's really kind of a sad album.
Yeah, I mean, talking about mellowness, this one mellows out pretty hardcore, I thought. Maybe that's just compared to Bedlam right before it, but just because that's how I listen to it. But I definitely don't see the quality drop off that seems to be reflected in the ratings.
That's a low rating.
Yeah, this is an album that I think is it's definitely like an emotional album for me. Since We've Been Wrong is extremely sad. Hail of Nimbatals is very sad. With Twilight as My Guide, I think is a fucking amazing track. I don't know if it's sad, but it's definitely like, it's like kind of creepy and just like unsettling. I think Cedric kind of like, I mean, obviously Omar wrote this music and he has a lot of great parts on here, but I do think like Cedric is the star of this particular album, more so than maybe on some of the other ones. And a lot of my favorite parts from him are on here. Teflon is one of their catchiest songs. Teflon might actually be their catchiest song overall. And it's one of their most popular. I'm pretty sure it was a single. Teflon is catchy as fuck. Cotopaxi is a banger. Cotopaxi is like the one like totally heavy song on here. Yeah, I have no complaints about this album at all. I love this shit.
It's really solid. I am surprised I've never hated it, but I am surprised there are people who hate it. It's grown on me since I've listened to it. Since
I have listened to this one the least. This one and Nocturniquet I've listened to the least.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've listened to Francis the Mute the least.
Is that even one of their albums?
You, dude.
No, I think it's just some archival release.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard that album.
Yeah, before. I guess it is lucky me. I've often said I got into a lot of this music, like a lot of music that you guys listen to later in my life, which in some ways I'm like, damn, I wish I'd had that growing up. But in other ways, I think it's cool to like when I don't listening to stuff when I can appreciate it more too. So, listening to Francis Mute only a couple weeks ago is actually pretty cool. I think, yeah.
What do you think about Bedlam, Jim? You didn't really say anything about it.
I don't rank it as highly as Amputechture or Francis or De-Loused. That's just kind of like an off the cuff rating. I don't know. It didn't strike me the same way. It's still badass, but I think I have less exposure to it than those other three as well. It could be it'll grow more on me.
How do you feel about the drumming? How do you feel about Pridgeon versus Theodore? Because a lot of people have very, very, very strong opinions about that. Because they are pretty different players.
I definitely don't have I don't have a strong opinion about it.
Because a lot of people think like Pridgeon is like one of the most amazing drummers of all time, and a lot of people think he's like a hack who like has no taste and like is totally unable to be restrained. And I could see that, but I also think his playing is really cool on here. So
fits the music, man.
Yeah, it fits the music for sure. It didn't strike me as
who are these
tasteless?
Who say things like that? I don't know.
Just people who don't particularly care for his drumming style. I don't think they're like trying to like condemn him as a human being or anything.
I didn't say that. I don't know. That's pretty strong terms for like the dude's obviously a technically gifted drummer. And I don't know.
There are definitely like drumming purists who dislike erratic drumming in general.
Yeah, anybody who cares about purity that much,
that's coming from that camp.
You have to get out of their way. They're crazy. These people are usually insane.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a strong opinion about it. I think the drumming is excellent on that album.
Yeah,
the energy definitely is something to be admired. It's like punk rock energy, but technical, which I tend to really like stuff like that. So I like that. Yeah. I like bringing in like that sort of like rawness that you would expect from less complex music, but bringing it into complex music. And Bedlam is all about doing that. So I think that's awesome. The Mars Volta in general are kind of all about doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. There's like that sort of punk, like pathos to a lot of Mars Volta stuff, despite its complexity.
I mean, it's coming from post-hardcore, so it's only natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, I don't hate punk as much as I think I do.
Right, and then Nocturniquet, their final album, or as of now, their final album.
Yeah, the final one.
Maybe someday they'll put out something else. I remember anticipating this so much. I was chomping at the bit for this to come out because it was delayed a lot. Omar finished the music with D'Anthony Parks, who, by the way, his drumming on here is amazing, and I fucking love D'Anthony Parks. Like, insanely different drummer from Pridgeon, so I love that Omar adapted his songwriting so much to Parks. But he finished the music for this, like, I think in like 2009, and Cedric took a long time to finish his parts here, and I think that was a source of a lot of tension because this album got delayed a really long time. And I was so psyched when this came out. Were you into the Mars Volta back at this time, Jim?
Not hardcore. I was never as hardcore into them as you were back in the day. This is a band I didn't fully appreciate until later.
That's kind of surprising.
I remember when this came out, though. I was just thinking about this actually earlier today, like listening to it right when it came out, and it didn't connect. But I was a young pleb in 2012. So.
Yeah, like, it sounds electronic, so therefore I don't like it.
Exactly.
I guarantee that's
exactly
what you thought.
what I assumed. Yeah, I guarantee that's what I thought, exactly. And that is just super fucking dumb.
D'Anthony Parks is just like the master of those like weird kind of like off time grooves. Like you hear it on a lot of Omar's solo albums that Parks plays on too. But like when you listen to the drumming on here, it's like a normal rock groove, but there's just like, I don't know enough about the technical terminology of drumming to like really describe it technically, but like there's just like a little thing that's off about the groove that makes it sound like so fucking cool and so fucking weird. And that's like so much of this album, like just the very beginning of the album at the whip hand, just like listen to the drumming and it's like, yeah. you listen to that beat and you're like, that's so weird. Like, why is that so weird? But it is. And
dude, that kind of tension is so important in good music, and it can tip you off to something that's too too like quantized. Like so much modern pop music is quantized into oblivion, where like every single hit is exactly on the beats, like mathematically precise. But when you have musicians who know when to lay back a little bit or when to push the tempo a little bit, then it just creates a tension that's really hard to capture.
Yeah. Although that mathematical precision is it works sometimes depending on the kind of music. That's a complaint of Matt Garska from Animals as Leaders. People don't like his drumming style because it's too precise or something like he's just on the beat exactly where it needs to be. But given that kind of music is just is just rhythmically really interesting, I think that's actually cool that he's able to do that. So I think it depends on the context. For an album like this, definitely. I would not want it to be on beat exactly.
Nocturniquet. I think Nocturniquet is the real filter of the Mars Volta's catalog, to be honest. Because really? Nocturniquet is a very strange album. The lyrics, it's Cedric's best work lyrically. Like Cedric put a lot of time into the lyrics, which is why it got so delayed. But it shows because this is his best work lyrically. Like the writing, like Cedric's writing on here is amazing. Like. It's as surreal as all... We haven't talked a lot about Cedric's lyrics during this episode, but it's a big part of what makes the Mars Volta great. It's like...
I don't pay attention to lyrics, haha.
I knew you were going to say that, but I don't think that's true.
He's not lying,
this
though.
Band.
I'm not lying.
He's not lying. He's trying to make a joke out of it. But...
You don't pay attention...
I don't get to lyrics until... I don't get to lyrics until... I've had many listens. It's just not something I pay attention to.
That's such a shame.
It's a pretty important part of what
it's not fair. It's not like it's not an intentional thing. It's just how I hear it.
The lyrics are...
My dad's a guitar player too, and he says the same thing. It might be that.
What's that?
My dad's a guitar player, and he says the same thing too. He just doesn't listen to lyrics much.
The lyrics are a really, really important part of the Mars Volta, though. They're like...
I think so, yeah.
Like, I don't understand how you could not pay attention to them. It's not really music
so
that invites you to not pay attention to them.
I know the lyrics to Televators, but that's because I've heard it 50,000 times.
Listen to it again. Listen to the lyrics. They're crazy.
I'm sure they're fucking great. I'm not saying this is a virtue.
Empty Vessels is actually some of the more Cedric's more coherent lyrics, and that might be my favorite. Honestly, like some of my favorite lyrics.
His lyrics
that song's
on here,
like wistful and like I love that track. That's one that gets stuck in my head all the time.
His lyrics on here are very surreal, but they're like surreal in a more coherent way than his previous lyrics, and I love his previous lyrics too. But like this album is really genius. It's like a loose concept album, basically about like a boy who like has like a prostitute for a mother and lives in like a shitty house. Like it's like a loose concept album about that. And it makes a lot of sense when you listen through it, like how that theme kind of runs through it. And yeah, like every single song on here is great. It's a very, very weird record. Instrumentally, it's like very similar to what Omar was doing solo around this time. And Cedric just he adapted his own style like really amazingly to fit this music. Because like Omar's doing a lot of different stuff here, working with Parks, and Cedric. It took him a long time to do, but like he fit his own style perfectly with it, which I think is like one thing about the Mars Volta that's like really special is how like it's not that collaborative between the two of them really, but it always sounds like it is, and it like sounds perfectly organic in the end.
I'm just thinking of that lyric in Cavaletas. It's like, I am a DEFCON of Angora goats. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, there's not as much of that on this album. That kind of just bizarre, almost word salad. Sometimes I wonder, I'm sure he has like abstract associations he puts to the, or maybe I'm just stupid and I'm bad at interpreting what they mean. In some cases I can tell, but like, but yeah, I don't know that there's much of a substance to a lot of the lyrics.
Not substance in the sense of like direct description or anything.
There's no reference. Yeah.
He did work.
That's kind of the point.
One of his common working processes, Cedric's, was to like just like kind of sing out the vocal melodies without words, and then like write words to match what he was singing out. And that comes across a lot, like when you listen to Francis and Amputechture. There are a couple tracks on some Omar solo material with Cedric that are like kind of raw, and like you hear Cedric just like singing wordlessly on top of them, and they're really cool. They're like almost sort of sound like demos in that regard. But the words of Nocturniquet are a lot more meticulous. It's conceptual, and it's very emotional, and like this is a really sad album. It's like a very lonely album. It's like a very desperate album, and it hit me the right way emotionally when I was first listened to it. I think it was freshman year of college when this came out, and this got me through that time in my life.
Yeah, it's really good. It was one of the first I listened to. It was De-Loused, and then Bedlam, and then this one I think was the third one I listened to. I went out of order. It's weird you say that this might be the filter, because I feel like this is one of their most listenable, along with Octahedron. I feel like if I wanted to ease someone into this catalog, I'd pick these. But I think maybe because of that electronic influence and all like the kind of interesting stuff they're doing on the vocals actually softens the vocals a bit for people. Maybe that's kind of how I felt. But I'm a little surprised you say that. But maybe yeah.
It's so off. It's so weird. Like just like the rhythms are so strange. Like this is a really weird album. It's not as like instantaneously weird on the surface as some of their previous material, but it's very odd. And I feel like a good amount of mainstream music listeners would listen to this and just be like this is making me uncomfortable. Just because like you can't tap your foot to these drum patterns, you know, like they're really fucking bizarre. I could be wrong, and I mean like you can't make statements like this in like a universal way because different people are gonna come into all this music with different tastes. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here like this is my least favorite of the discography, and I wonder if that's a result of my love for the earlier end of the discography. Like, there's definitely a departure in intensity between this and De-Loused, and that intensity is something I really love about Mars Volta. So I wonder if that's affecting the way I hear this.
Yeah, there are a couple of intense songs here, like Malik Walker and Dyslexicon, but for the most part, it's definitely way more down tempo and quieter than their other stuff. Yeah, it's an album that I immediately loved it just because I love the Mars Volta, but it is an album that you have to sit with a little bit. The lyrics are also a really important part of what this album is, so. I mean, I don't really see how you could listen to it and not hear them. I mean, if you're listening to the music, I don't see how you could not hear the lyrics. That doesn't really make sense.
I seriously don't. Like,
for some music, I could see that, but not for this.
It's not like it's not a choice. It's like I seriously just don't even hear it. I have to try to listen to lyrics.
Interesting. For some bands, I'm the same way, but it depends. Definitely not for this.
Yeah, it's something I don't think to pay attention to most of the time, and I don't really hear it unless I make the point to.
I mean, I don't always pick up on every like lyric that's happening. Sometimes I'm not sure what the vocalist said. Weirdly, so when Language by the Contortionist came out, there was no lyric sheet for like a long time, and so there were parts where it was really difficult to tell what Michael was doing, like what he was saying, and so like on all the lyric websites there were like question marks and stuff. So sometimes it's hard to tell. But I did like to follow along. Yeah, I try to listen to the lyrics pretty early on. The first and foremost, yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I'm gravitating to what the instruments are doing. And then maybe, like, the sound of the vocals. But it's kind of hard for me to miss them. Even in, like, Cannibal Corpse, I just know exactly what he's saying all the time. The Cookie Monster. I'm just kidding. I have no idea what he's saying most of the time.
With Vomitoma.
Vomitoma, yeah. You can't help but really pay attention to the lyrics.
Said that shit at the exact same time. Like when you're listening to a Screwdriver Up Her Urethra by Vomitoma, like the imagery is so intense it can't be ignored.
Oh man.
Oh, Vomitoma.
Vomitoma.
Oh, I love you.
Shout out to Vomitoma. Official shout out from the Butternotes podcast to Vomitoma.
Please come on our show.
Hate Fucked in a Hospital Dumpster really has done important things in all three of our lives.
3.25.
God, who is this?
Still
pleb
higher than
rating at
Dona Novus
1.5.
I would listen. I think
What
I
an
would listen.
absolute
I would
pleb
listen
you
to
are,
Gore
Anna.
Noise over Dona Novus Pacem, I think.
Wasn't that person you just clicked the person who had the 2,000 ratings or the 5,000?
I don't think so.
Oh, I thought it was.
No,
No, it's not
maybe?
the same. It's kind of a
Oh
similar
yeah, it
profile.
totally is actually.
Oh, it is?
No, it definitely is. It
definitely
is
that
the same
person. Yeah, you're totally right.
I don't know why I remembered that.
What's the purpose exactly of even rating Gore Noise albums on Rate Your Music?
2,100 of them.
I mean, there's 8 ratings for. How the fuck did you find this band, Anthony?
Don't worry about it.
How did you find Vomitoma?
I actually, Kevin Whitby absolutely loved Vomitoma and
Oh,
he
is
would like
that right?
lean over the line all the time at Ruby Tuesday and like just like tell me Vomitoma song titles. He'd be like, "Hey Anthony," he'd like lean over the line. He'd be like, "Pick a hole or make one," and then he'd like crack up.
This kind of music reminds me of like
That's a
to market
great-
it, you'd have
great
to write
subtitle.
a link on a bathroom stall at like a nasty truck stop or something. It's like listen to our EP. That's how I feel like you
Dude,
discover this music.
Some of these are so gross. Miscarriage through the colostomy bag. Oh my fuck. Dude, there's 70 songs on this.
How long is it?
Pick a hole or make one is an insanely fucking
It
great
doesn't
title.
say.
I have
That's
like
a
we have to be
beautiful
real.
Oh my god.
Hey, fuck, Anna rated this one too. 1 out of 5, even lower than Hate Fucked in a Hospital Dumpster.
He went on a tear of downrating Gore Noise. I don't think Gore Noise needed to be downrated that much.
Oh my god. Oh, that's weird. It's not on Spotify.
Most of the stuff
Is
on
Waco
Spotify.
Jesus on Spotify?
Bunch of,
No, they're not.
we're about to find out.
No, they're not.
They're not
Nope. They're not.
based.
Alright. Well, we stopped talking about the Mars Volta like 5 minutes ago. So,
Let's rate these things, yeah.
yeah, let's rate
Oh
it.
yeah, we still have to do that. That's tough.
That is tough.
It is kind of tough.
Are we including Scabdates and Tremulant?
Nah, just the main 6.
Just the main. Okay, cool. I can go.
All right.
We'll go 6-1 be Nocturniquet, Octahedron, Bedlam, Amputechture, De-Loused, Francis.
All right. I'll give it a shot. I think I would go 6-1. I'd probably put Nocturniquet at the bottom, then Octahedron, then Amputechture, then Francis, then De-Loused, then Bedlam is definitely my favorite.
I would go 6-1. Octahedron, Bedlam, Nocturniquet, Amputechture, Francis, De-Loused. That's ad hoc, man. Like, I don't have a clear ranking of this stuff. I think it's all amazing. I love this band, so take that with a grain of salt.
You've loved this band for a long time, too. You've been
yeah.
listening to these dudes for fucking forever.
Yeah, so my ranking is ad hoc.
Well, join us next time for our Banagnuk, or what's the artist?
Tick Your Vake. I don't know if that's how you pronounce
we're gonna do a
it.
Tick Your Vake deep dive. It'll be on our YouTube short, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we should be able to get through that discography in about 4 minutes.
Join us next time for our AIDS deep dive.
Oh shit. We've got Ticker Vake on here on Rate Your Music.
The split isn't on there yet.
Here's Benag.
I need to add the split onto there.
Dude, that album cover is awesome, dude. I love it. It's terrifying.
Dude, what the fuck? Who is this person?
This is where we found the person last
This is
time.
how we
were
found
looking
them.
at this. Yeah.
Anna Loves You is just listening to all of the fucking gore noise. Okay, that's it. We'll see you next time.